This is video lesson number 2, excerpt and commentary of Animal Farm by George Orwell, 1945. As I have underlined in the previous video lesson, in this last part here, the first chapter mentioned what Major emphasizes mostly is that we are in presence of a class struggle. We shall now go to chapter 7 and see how the novel proceeds. Napoleon stood sternly surveying his audience. Then he uttered a high-pitched whimper. Immediately the dogs bounded forward, seized 4 of the pigs by the ear, and dragged them, squealing with pain and terror, to Napoleon's feet. The pigs' ears were bleeding, the dogs had tasted blood, and for a few moments they appeared to go quite mad. To the amazement of everybody, 3 of them flung themselves upon Boxer. Boxer saw them coming and put out his great hoof, caught a dog in mid-air, and pinned him to the ground. The dog shrieked for mercy, and the other 2 fled with their tails between their legs. Boxer looked at Napoleon to know whether he should crush the dog to death or let it go. Napoleon appeared to change countenance and sharply ordered Boxer to let the dog go, whereat Boxer lifted his hoof and the dog slunk away, bruised and howling. Presently the tumult died down. The 4 pigs waited, trembling, with guilt written on every line of their countenances. Napoleon now called upon them to confess their crimes. They were the same 4 pigs as had protested when Napoleon abolished the Sunday meetings. Without any further prompting, they confessed that they had been secretly in touch with Snowball ever since his expulsion, that they had collaborated with him in destroying the windmill, and that they had entered into an agreement with him to hand over Animal Farm to Mr. Frederick. They added that Snowball had privately admitted to them that he had been Jones's secret agent for years. When they had finished their confession, the dogs promptly tore their throats out, and in a terrible voice Napoleon demanded whether any other animal had anything to confess. The 3 hens, who had been the ringleaders in the attempted rebellion over the eggs, now came forward and stated that Snowball had appeared to them in a dream and incited them to disobey Napoleon's orders. They too were slaughtered. Then a goose came forward and confessed to having secreted 6 ears of corn during the last year's harvest and eaten them in the night. Then a sheep confessed to having urinated in the drinking pool, urged to do this, so she said, by Snowball, and 2 other sheep confessed to having murdered an old ram, an especially devoted follower of Napoleon. When it was all over, the remaining animals, except for the pigs and dogs, crept away in a body. They were shaken and miserable. They did not know which was more shocking, the treachery of the animals who had leagued themselves in with Snowball, or the cruel retribution they had just witnessed. As we can see, the tone of the narration changes from that we've analyzed before in the first video lesson to this one. So if in chapter 1 Orwell shows through his writing what the conditions of the majority of the population of Russia under the Tsar was like, in this case what he is portraying to his readers is instead the terrible punishments that Napoleon, or rather Stalin, inflicted upon the dissenters of his regime. So we are right in the middle of Orwell's denunciation of Stalin's terrible crimes, referring to the purge trials that had been revealed in the 1930s 30s and that were now of common knowledge. So, again, Napoleon embodies in this metaphoric novel Stalin. And in these paragraphs that we have read, it becomes quite clear the terrible tortures that dissenters had to undergo and their ultimate death sentence. Snowball is the representation, the symbolic representation of Trotsky, and the way Trotsky was represented by the Stalin's regime in the Soviet Union. So a Trotsky that was conniving behind Stalin's back with the enemy of the proletariat revolution, the aristocracy, or the ruling class of the time. In this case, symbolized by Mr. Frederick, the owner of the farm, and therefore man. Let's proceed. Never had the farm, and with a kind of surprise they remembered that it was their own farm, every inch of it their own property, appeared to the animals so desirable a place. Clover looked down the hillside, her eyes filled with tears. If she could have spoken her thoughts, it would have been to say that it was not what they had aimed at when they had set themselves years ago to work for the overthrow of the human race. These scenes of terror and slaughter were not what they had looked forward to on that night when the old Major first stirred them to rebellion. If she herself had had any picture of the future, it had been of a society of animals set free from hunger and the whip, all equal, each working according to his capacity, the strong protecting the weak as she had protected the less brood of ducklings with a foreleg on the night of Major's speech. Instead, she did not know why, they had come to a time when no one dared speak his mind, when fierce, growling dogs roamed everywhere, and when you had to watch your comrades torn to pieces after confessing to shocking crimes. Such were her thoughts, though she lacked the words to express them. At last, feeling this to be in some way a substitute for the words she was unable to find, she began to see Beasts of England. The other animals sitting round her took it up, and as he sang it 3 times over, very tunefully, but slowly and mournfully, in a way they had never sung it before. They had just finished singing it for the 3rd time when Squealer, attended by 2 dogs, approached them with the air of having something important to say. He announced that by a special decree of Comrade Napoleon, Beasts of England had been abolished. From now on onwards it was forbidden to sing it. The animals were taken aback. "Why," cried Muriel, "it's no longer needed, comrade," said Squealer stiffly. "Beasts of England was the song of the rebellion. But the rebellion is now completed. The execution of the traitors this afternoon was the final act. The enemy, both external and internal, has been defeated. In Beasts of England we expressed our longing for a better society in days to come. But that society has now been established. Clearly, the song has no longer any purpose." Notice that even the last solace in a moment of great suffering is taken away from the animals. The power established by the regime decides what it is allowed for them to dream, to hope for, and as Squealer, the Napoleon's messengers points out, that society has now been established, the society of the rebellion. But unlike what they had truly hoped for, a more just, a more equal society that protected um, the, the, um, that protected the weak and the frail was now substituted by another form of um, fearful power, a power in which those who were one time at the beginning comrades all together, united to fight against the common enemy, had now turned out to be subdued and exploited by a different and strong terror, shocking, fierce, and cruel as the one that they had overthrown previously. I want you to notice also one thing. At the beginning of our reading, we mentioned Boxer. Boxer is a horse, and in this scene, Orwell wants to underline how metaphorically horses and dogs, which have a positive connotation in general because they are loyal um, to their masters. In this case, they are portrayed as being blindly loyal. They are unable to distinguish right from wrong, but give the loyalty to the master despite the fact that the actions carried out by the masters are horrible to begin with. We can say that the class struggle, the fight between the aristocracy and the majority of people in the pre-revolution Russia has turned out into a fight for power, period. And in this way, Orwell fulfills his primary intention, which is that to convey the idea that every ideal, even the best ideal um, pursued, can become a worse evil if it is brought to its extreme and if it is not kept in check by rationality and loyalty to the ideal rather than to the people that embody power,